Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Carvel Community Meeting. Today's date is March 24th, 2022. If you're watching this recording from home, we would love for you to come and join us live. We meet every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, and it's just a way for you to come and meet the team. You can bring up any discussions you have about Carvel, any questions, any feedback you want to provide, or if you just want to sit and listen in, that's perfectly fine as well. We would love to have you. If you do attend and you have something you wish to bring the team, and if there's anyone on this call right now that has something, please add that to the discussion topic section below here, and we'll get to it towards the end of the meeting. If you aren't able to join our meetings and you still want to contact us and you want to provide something or have a discussion or just join the community and meet other community members, you can find us in the Carvel Slack channel in the Kubernetes Slack workspace or on Twitter at Carvel_dev. At any point you are interacting with us or any member of the community, whether it be in the meeting, Slack, email, Twitter, etc., we ask that you please read and abide by our code of conduct, which is listed here in the agenda, and it points to its location that's in the repo as well. If you're using any of the Carvel tools, we would love to know more about how you're using that. So we created this pinned issue here, and it just asks you to provide a few details on yourself as well as how you're using any of those tools. And you can provide your organization's logo, if you have one, to that comment in a PNG file, and we'll get it added to the adopters page as well. But that part is totally optional, although we would love to showcase you in the adopters file and show other community members who all is using Carvel as well. All the attendees, if you haven't already done so, please add your name and any organization that you represent to the list here. On to announcements. As I mentioned last week, Carvel is hiring. We're looking for a product line manager. So click on this job rec, review it. If it sounds interesting to you, you can come reach out to us in Slack or send us an email, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about it. But we're a solid team. We're a lot of fun, and I'm personally biased, but I think we got a pretty good bunch here, and if it sounds interesting to you, we would love to talk more. So content this week, we got a pretty heavily packed week of content. So we got 3 blog posts. 2 of them are surrounding our big release that we had this week, which was kapp-controllers 0.34, the KCTRL. So Sumik, who is on the CAP team based in India, wrote up 2 blog posts. One of them is more of an introduction to this kapp-controllers CLI. Go give that a read. Let us know what you think about it. And then the other one talks about making the most out of CLIs and talking about other approaches there as well. So really interesting blog posts. Please go give those a read and let us know what you think. The next blog post that we posted just today is by Joao. Joao, anything you want to touch on for this post?
No, it is just it's not like a very big blog post, but it's trying to answer some questions that we heard people ask about image package, like why are all bundled images copied to the same repository, or why do I have so many tags in my repository, and tries to explain a little bit how image package is working, and also gives you some information about especially like some confusing terms that are hard to find on the wild on the internet, and people talk about repositories everywhere and things like that. So that's basically it.
Very cool and super helpful. Thanks, Joao. Any questions on those posts? Any comments? Upcoming, we have a vlog coming from John Ryan, Introduction to YTT Overlays. And then the following week, we will have Garrett Cheadle doing something over parameterizing your project configuration with YTT. So we're trying to pump out a lot of content every week so that we keep the community informed and just talk about use cases and whatnot with the tools as well as things that might entail with our releases. But we also want the community to share anything that they're working on as well when it comes to Carvel, anything that's related to Carvel. So we created this sign up sheet on GitHub, and you can sign up for any one of the dates. If there's not a date listed here, if it's further out, feel free to add a row indicating that date that you want to have your content published. It could be any type of medium that you're comfortable with, whether that be a blog or a vlog or a demo or a webinar or anything like that. We would love to have you participate. And for anyone who is not a Carvel maintainer, we do want to say thank you by sending you some swag. So we'll send you a t-shirt, and yeah, we really appreciate it. We'll publicize it through Twitter and email and Slack and on here as well. And if you're able to attend the community meeting and talk more about that content, we would love to have you as well, but it's not required. Hey, as I mentioned earlier, we released the kapp-controller 0.34. We did a little demo of it last week, and we were able to release it shortly thereafter. So anybody want to just give some highlights on this big release?
I guess not.
Because it wasn't that big after all.
Well, there's a bunch of, I guess the people who are here didn't do most of this work, but this is the big K-control release. And otherwise, I think a lot of the stuff that I guess Ben and Dimitri did is a lot of like smaller kind of like cleanup level, that's smoothing out, filling in some gaps, smoothing some things over. I think the big news is that K-control is included in the release, and that's, yeah, that team's not here, but you can read their blog post.
Awesome, Joe. I appreciate that. And it sounds like we're starting the debate already with how to refer it to as. Is it KCTRL or is it K-control? I heard Dimitri call it KCTRL and spelled it out. But now who knows? Is it, I don't know, like a cube cuddle type of thing?
Yeah, it does really sound very similar to Coop Cuddle, and it has an R in it, which is interesting.
We could, you can maybe get Kick Troll out of that too.
Yeah,
We could call
like
it
that.
Kick Troll.
Is that a request?
Control.
It's new enough we can rename it. Maybe Cube Curdle.
Ooh.
Curdle. That brings a nice image.
Excellent. So let us know how you want to pronounce it. It'll be a fun little game. Okay, on to status updates. Project roadmap. How are things looking here, Aaron?
Looking good. Yeah, no real big changes here. The plan's the plan till it's not the plan. Maybe one thing to just bring some awareness to is we will be doing, some more forward focused road mapping exercises in the next month. So if there are things that are on your mind, things that you would like to have us consider and discuss as a potential priority, please do let us know.
Think there are any questions or comments on the roadmap? Okay. Moving on to backlog stuff, got some YTT stuff here. Carrie?
Yeah, I can talk through that. So these are in progress items right now. We're working on some guides and examples to make the docs more clear and help with newcomers to YTT. So that's a focus. Then also working on better supporting Windows paths in data I use flags. So that's been in progress. That's currently going through like a review cycle right now.
Cool, yeah. And then there's some stuff that Carrie and I have been talking through around an interesting use case that's come up around, can you use YTT in what we're thinking of as a cookie cutter type use case where most of the files just need to pass through and a few of them need some templating. It's a little bit different than like how we built this tool up from the beginning. So we're kind of digging into that to see what could we do to potentially support that.
Could you help me
Then-
understand that use case a little bit more?
Yeah. There's actually even a project called Cookie Cutter that if you go take a look at what they're up to. So think, for example, you've got like a base dev project and you've got a whole bunch of like starter artifacts that you just need to have a stamp of this whole directory structure that's a project structure. And some of the things you want to be customized, like you want some templating to be in there, but far and wide, a lot of the stuff is boilerplate, but you want it to just show up en masse. You can do it, but there's a little gymnastics involved to sort of make it work right with file marks. Am I explaining the use case well?
Does not just importing the entire recursive folder and then maybe not all of the project is YAML. Is that okay?
That's it.
I get it.
Yeah, nice read. And so like today, YTT defaults to anything it doesn't recognize as a file to process is what we call data. It's not included in the output. So you need to mark, if you want something included in the output, you need to mark it as like text plain or something.
I see. So the way I would probably script around it right now is I would probably do like a recursive copy to another folder and then have like YTT output to that folder.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that would get you this sort of like file mark. Like you're just trying to override like basically the whole directory, like in a complete copy of the tree, but then overlay some specific files, right?
That's it.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we thought so too. So that's part of why we're kind of entertaining what's the minimal thing we could do with the tool to like be able to support that use case. And then
Yeah, I was talking with Dimitri a little bit yesterday about like just the need for bash, and then like usually is the thing that you'll reach for, right? Or like you'll put like some YTT commands in a make file or something, and it seems like there's no sort of like task management. Like it's hard to factor stuff into a YTT program and like tell YTT what to do. You have to like use the command line flags, and there's no config for the command line flags. And then we came up with the idea of maybe using like YTT libraries and like writing a small YTT program to tell it what to do. But you cannot do like file system operations and stuff. So that would not work in this case.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you probably through an integration, you can use some of that YTT functionality, but you'd break sort of the hermetic aspect of the tool. But you know, once you start using it as a library, then that's your choice, right? Yeah.
Oh, I meant like using YTT, like not using YTT as a library, but writing a YTT program that calls libraries from within YTT, so that you can actually put a file path in your YTT program and tell like YTT how to pull some directory structure together.
I see.
Like, doesn't normally solve that problem, but like if you start using libraries, then you can organize your code and like have a file that tells the build how to behave, right? Like you can pull data values from somewhere and push data values to other places and then output, any number of times you want and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But then like you don't have control of like what files you're really writing to unless you are dealing with those file marks like in the program. So, but I don't think you could do what you're talking about without also having some simple copy command outside of YTT. Like I can't think of a way to only do it with the programming language. So it's anyway, that's probably enough of a digression, but I think
No, that's actually something that's kind of come up around this is what about programmatic interaction with file marks? So it's a little tricky, but yeah, maybe there's something there where if we can identify what the general case is, that we can include a mechanism to be able to support this kind of thing.
I think that this is the clunkiest part of my experience with YTT so far, which is why Dimitri and I talked about it so much yesterday, is that it's hard to, like, once you know the programming model and are like using YTT as the Swiss Army knife, it's like you start using it for a lot of things, but you don't have a way to stay organized with the number of things that you're doing with the tool. So you have to reach for other tools to help keep you organized and like remember all of the different like hat tricks that you create to mutate your YAML so flexibly. Like a make file or scripts or stuff.
Yeah, interesting.
Whereas like other tools like Customize, they have the customization YAML, right? And when you have a customization YAML in a directory, that basically mostly tells Customize like what files to look at and like what it's doing and how it's configured and that sort of thing, right? So then you just run Customize build. And if you're like really careful with what you're doing, for the most part, you can put your data values and stuff like in a particular directory and like structure your project so you're only passing 1 or 2 file names to your YTT build. But there are weird use cases where your project needs to be like subdivided differently, and if you don't organize it right, then you end up with really complicated YTT commands.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, having a build plan that like helps drive these things that are sort of like you today you get the behavior you get. It's like whatever it's doing, and then you have to sort of work within that. And there's a few things you can tweak, but it usually involves like you're talking about managing directory structures or renaming files and stuff. So, Let's talk more about this.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like sort of a higher level UX need, like once but there might be some stuff in the programming language that can either be used creatively or maybe it's not there, like such as the file marks thing. That, you might need another language feature or another library or something and then some examples to make a nice experience.
Right. I think if we like dug in and enumerated a bunch of use cases and started to see what was common around that might give us some angle.
Yeah, I have a pretty starting to increase in complexity YTT project that I demoed yesterday and we'll be demoing again today. That the directory structure, I think Dimitri and I kind of sussed out, it feels a little bit suboptimal, but I'm doing some creative things like mixing different schemas from different folders. Like, I think I'm going to try some stuff and convert it to something that's flatter and simpler and uses libraries and see if I can turn YTT into a makefile a little bit. So we can probably sync up, like next week and see what the result of that experiment looks like.
Would love to see that. That sounds super cool.
Cool. I know that we were like in the middle of an agenda. So what's the next bullet point?
Yeah. It's related in a sense of, well, we were talking about using Go as a library, but that's not what you had meant. So the next bullet point was about we're actually hearing a growing number of folks starting to use YTT as a Go module, like not just a command line tool, but integrating it into their tools. And so we're starting to make some efforts to make that experience a little bit better. Like right now, there's some dependencies some hard dependencies that we have that if we just are thoughtful about it and pull those out to a different package, like you can just more get a clean, simple set of dependencies, ideally none outside of YTT. So that's what 639 is a step in that direction. And then the last bullet there is exploring an exploration of a potential feature for being able to emit comments outside of like as output from YTT templates. So you can imagine there's like a whole bunch of auditing use cases around here where you can name the source for where a value comes from. You can document that output, especially if YTT output is something that is a part of like a GitOps workflow and you're committing that to a repo, having something that explains where values came from can make that kind of troubleshooting that comes up around that a little bit easier. We're just kind of digging into that, see what that might look like, and gauging the complexity on that.
That sounds really cool to me. I didn't know that was a feature I wanted until you mentioned it. But looking at the YAML output and seeing like, yo, this came from a data value, that I would really like that.
Yeah, playing around. Been talking with Scott Rosenberg, if you're familiar.
Yeah,
and right. We've been playing around with the idea of wouldn't it be cool if you can know what source and set of overlays might have touched a given document, so that if you're trying to figure out what do I need to tweak in order to get the output I want, it would kind of point back to that. So there's a lot of interesting use cases around this.
Even if it wasn't like practical to, like, there are some comments that might be so simple, that it's worth putting there. Like when it's just literally one call to data values on a line for a value, like commenting where it came from is a really easy thing that the parser could probably do. But then there's like more complicated stuff that can happen. Like if you're in a loop or doing overlays and all of that. And at a minimum, like you could add a subcommand to YTT and like trace, like give it a line of YAML in a particular file in the output, and then ask YTT to like basically run the command and tell you what it did to generate that line. And that might be like technically possible. But yeah, that's a really interesting quality of life suggestion. I like that.
Yeah, we've been sort of exploring like what could we do to provide like a time machine experience in how your YAML's being processed. Like as you get more and more of that stuff, having the ability to kind of see where things are changing could be valuable. And if we leave breadcrumbs that could make it possible to have tooling that could do that, it's interesting.
This sort of debugging experience with the raw YAML, especially like as the complexity of projects grows, is why I think I see like the default recommendation for people to be like building their YAML and including it in their repository in the case of like Kubernetes configuration or other YAML driven systems, as opposed to like committing YTT programs to the repo and expecting some pipeline or supply chain that's like outside of your machine to go and inflate that stuff and give you back a good like error reporting experience. It just having a little bit more direct touch with that output of the artifact seems like it's a more recommendable workflow with like the state of tooling right now.
Well, wait, I feel like you just recommended against kapp-controller. I mean, which is fine, maybe that's accurate, but like fetch template deploy, the template step happens on a pod that you don't own. Like, right, like that's literally the flow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I feel like the templating step, it's hard to observe and like work with kapp-controller. And I know that the K-control CLI is going to be like looking at some of these problems. from like a debugging and like workflow perspective. But at some point, like you're going to need like pre-commit validation. Like if, say, you're using an app with YTT templating and you're expecting this stuff to get inflated at runtime, and then you want that, you know, at least it's hermetic. But like I'm not. Yeah, if you're like in a workflow where you're like debugging locally, and then you only commit the YTT program and then kapp-controller inflates it, like that's a pretty good experience still. But like the code review portion of this like seems like there's a piece of it there. And
It sounds like you want there's this piece of vaporware that like K-control is supposed to maybe evolve into, which is like the ability to run kapp-controller locally. Like I should be able to almost download, like have a shell script where like it fetches the image locally, it runs YTT locally, and then I can debug and introspect.
I think that this is a really important piece of the developer experience for a lot of controller type software, which is only configured through a custom resource, and where the important logic pieces of the control loop are a little bit inaccessible, because like people are storing their custom resource and it's basically only good at runtime inside the cluster.
Oh, dude,
like,
I mean,
yeah.
a little bit is polite. Like I don't know. Are we allowed to say hella in community meetings? It's hella inaccessible.
In the
Like,
1980s, we could.
yeah, there's things we do like with a package repository where there's like we're not even applying the package repository you gave us. We're sticking our own set of overlays that only exist in kapp-controller source code onto that package repository. So it's like, do you want to know what's going to happen to your package repository YAML when it gets deployed on a cluster? Like, anyways, sorry, what are we in, like the third bullet point of the YTT status update?
No, we're doing great. This is really interesting conversation, so don't cut it short artificially. But yeah, I also see that there's like an opportunity here where there might be some templating that you would want to get done inside of a CI/CD, especially the CI part, and that maybe there's some stuff that's more live. That so this gives an option to be able to actually do some of that, because in YTT comments are code. So
Yeah.
that's a possibility.
I definitely see the like the use case for last mile customizations is like sacred to platform engineers, because the platform engineer will often own a large portion of the Kubernetes configurations. So that custom resource is really important to, you know, someone who's building platform or doing app operations, like the DevOps person of some team. And like, at least there, like that's sort of a separate use case that's using the same mechanism. It's like, maybe you want to actually build your app's configuration as a raw YTT program in the cluster. Sure, you can go and do that. But it's also a different consideration when you're trying to stack on overlays and add like an IAM role, or, you know, make sure that somebody's containers always sleep in the pre-stop hook or something, you know, like those things like might be somebody else's problem domain completely. And this gives them a place to tie into, you know, whatever is producing the YAML portion of the template phase. But that's like a slightly different need than like building the entire configuration. And both of these things, or only one of these things, can happen. And to consider like the people and their incentives there is separate.
I love what you're doing to tease this apart, that like there's application development / packaging needs. Like there's templating needs in that. And then you're also saying, I'm hearing you say, yeah, and then in the cluster, there's like I wish I had a mechanism to enforce policies, to be able to like do these operational things that frankly the developers just don't care. But we care, because we're on the hook for making sure that the stuff's available in production. So we do things to like make that work well. And so yeah, it's like a whole like yes, there's templating, but it's just happening for two very different reasons.
Anyway, I don't want to take up too much space or time on this, but like, just thanks for listening to my thoughts about. Am I advocating for kapp-controller to not be used? No, but like, there's definitely just considerations and like usability concerns and limits to the existing parts of the software we have, where it's like, you know, some things might be possible to be used, and it's not that you can't create a good experience, but there might be an even better experience if you like make different trade-offs, like storing a large amount of your YAML in the repo for the apps that you control, while still, you know, leveraging package installs for things that you do not package. Mm-hmm. What's the next bullet point?
Kapp-controller. Who put this in wants to speak more on this?
I put this one in. So issue 212, which was opened by our very own Nick from Tanzu Community Edition, is asking for a new feature to be able to add some additional metadata to the package CR to be able to describe the contents within it, especially for something that contains multiple pieces of software within it that are different versions. So we agree with it. There's a pull request currently open, which I have linked in the document. And we're mostly just looking for some concrete use cases. If anyone also has this kind of problem, feel free to throw their use case on that pull request or issue. And then we're just looking for some feedback on the naming of the fields that we are adding, just to make sure that they are the most semantically close to the things that they are attempting to describe, because they are effectively packages within packages, and naming is hard. So go for it, Nick.
So yeah, I think somebody pinged me last week or the week before to ask to review this PR, and I totally forgot. I apologize for that. I got wrapped up in helping to finalize the first, I guess as we're calling it in TCE, like a meta package or app toolkit, which is like one of VMware's first official like package of packages that we're pushing out. So this is actually quite timely, because these changes would allow, you know, that package to now list, hey, here's all the software that's inside of our package. So I will I'll make sure I get this on my list of things to review. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate that. And before I go on, I don't know if you saw Carrie's request in the chat. She's just wanting you to share the YTT repo that you had mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. That should be in my GitHub org that I've been using for a demo, and then I think it's called TCE Flux Pinifed. I just typed that from memory, but I can check it. I just only put it in the chat, but I can actually link it in the HackMD. There's a Carvel subdirectory on the main commit right now. And again, I might be reorganizing some things, but I will link the repo in this right here. Cool. So it's under that discussion topic item there for the DevOps Columbia meetup. There's a link to that repository.
Awesome. Thank you.
And there, some of the things about the Carvel subdirectory in there are a little confusing, mainly that the YTT lib folder is actually named with 2 underscores, so it doesn't actually mean anything. And the overlays folder, not all of the files in there are actually overlays. but there's a bunch of schema files in there, and then there's a make file that starts all of the YTT builds. So, yeah, this is, I guess, my only thing is that I added to the discussion topics. That I'm going to be at the DevOps Columbia meetup tonight, and I did the Kubernetes Atlanta meetup yesterday. I think the recording for the Atlanta meetup is on YouTube, and there's like, it's like a multi-hour recording because it's a meetup and there was like multiple presentations. But see if I can like find some bits from my presentation. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. It's mainly a Pinniped demo, but I packaged up the Pinniped stuff using YTT. I'm using a TCE cluster, using package installs, but the whole GitOps portion of it is initially directed by Flux. Mainly just, I know how to use Flux because I helped build it. But there's a little bit of kapp-controller stuff in there too. So the RBAC stuff is in there. There's a little bit of Kayam, little bit of Helm. It's kind of like 3 package managers or 3 GitOps controllers being used in once. It's a little bit crazy. Anyway, I figured that it's a good example of where someone might end up if they try to do this in their own environment. And yeah.
Cool, thanks, Lee. And for those that are watching, Lee is a developer advocate here at VMware, and we're really appreciative of all the stuff that Lee does for all the projects and for the tech community at large. So super appreciative of all the work you do. All
I'm
right.
excited. I'll be joining these meetings more regularly so that we can talk about engineering problems and cool usability stuff. So
yeah, sweet, awesome. Really appreciate your input too. It's been great. All right, so that leaves us with no more discussion topics. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up before we head out? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. It was great discussion. Really appreciate all the input that we had here today. If you're watching this from home, we would love for you to come join us and chime in with your thoughts and feedback. It's really helpful for us to hear how folks are using our tools because we can build them, but when we learn more about how people are using them, that's where we'll shine even brighter. So please let us know your thoughts, provide a feedback, et cetera, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks.